Hi, hello. Welcome back to Ultra Retrospective, my journey to revisit every Ultraman show and see if they still hold up. I don't want to spend too long on the preamble. Today's subject is Ultraman G.E.E.D. G.E.E.D follows more or less the same changes to the format that Orb made. There's no attack team, the cast is smaller and you get to know them better, and the gimmick is once again fusions. That said, one of the show's major themes is making a name for yourself and forming your own identity. So let's talk about what this show does to form its own, starting with the plot. 7 years have passed since a version of Earth was threatened by a Belial-themed apocalypse, his appearance traumatizing the entire population. If there's one criticism I want to get out of the way now, not of the show itself, but more in regards to franchise management, if they wanted to market this show, wouldn't it have made sense to depict the events of this prologue in one of the bajillion Ultra Fight specials? I don't know, this story seems more important to tell than whatever was going on in Ultra Fight Orb. Anyways, that special did tease this show's Ultra, G.E.E.D, who lives on Earth under the name Riku. We've got another show where the host is the Ultra. Funny thing about that, everyone's scared of him at first, and it's because he looks like Belial. That's because he's Belial's son. That's right, Belial. Okay, not actually. Riku is more like a science baby, he was made in a tube. There's no Mrs. Belial, as far as we know at least. In spite of his origins, Riku chooses to fight when the monsters of the week show up. He's the one who came up with the name G.E.E.D anyways. What's the significance of G.E.E.D? You know, what does it mean? Well... That's what it means. Along with the sudden appearance of fusion monsters and people all over Japan getting superpowers, getting classified as little stars, Riku leaps into action with the help of new friends, one of which being a stranded Ultraman Zero. Yeah, that's why I waited until the Mega Monster Battle video to cover this one. There's a lot going on in G.E.E.D. The show is throwing a lot at the viewer right out the gate, and it can be overwhelming. If nothing else, it's ambitious and it does make for some initial intrigue, attempting to tackle a lot of ideas, with some of them being kind of heavy. On paper. Before we get into that, let's talk about what this show gets right, the cast. Raised by adoptive parents, protagonist Riku spends most of the series being a generally nice guy. There isn't a lot I can say about him. I think he's an alright protagonist. I like that he's a little more aloof than most. The show does a decent enough job at making me care about him and his anxieties about who he really is and what he stands for. He's not one of my favorite Ultraman protagonists, but I do think he's likable. It's worth mentioning that he's also a giant mega fan of a TV show named Dawnshine. It's a tribute to the kind of heroes Toei makes, and it plays a weirdly large role in Riku's backstory. Whenever he's having a bad time, he flashes back to a meet and greet that he did when he was a kid. It's quirky, but it's kind of fun. I don't know where else to put this, but here's some interesting actor trivia. The last show starred Hideo Ishiguro as Guy. He was one of the oldest to play an Ultraman protagonist at the time. He was 27. Tatsuomi Hamada was the exact opposite, being one of the youngest at the time. He played Riku around the ages of 16 and 17. The fusion gimmick from Orb returns. Through the use of themed suppositories, Riku can combine 2 Ultramen with himself to become a variety of evil eye-shaped men. But out of all of them, I think his first form is the best. He does have a base form that's briefly seen, but for all intents and purposes, G.E.E.D Primitive is the real base form, even if he still needs to fuse to get it. It's saying something that I like this design enough to own an SH Figuarts of it. They made a really good, unique modern Ultraman design. And only one good, unique modern Ultraman design. I think every other form Riku takes on looks very over-designed and ugly. Royal Mega Master takes the crown. This is probably my least favorite new generation Ultraman design ever. And the worst part is that he uses it a lot in the last quarter of the show, but more on the fusions later. Okay, time for the other characters. Pega is an alien Pegasa, see Ultra 7 for more, who's been friends with Riku for years. He's alright. He's there to be an exposition dumper when the AI assistant Rem isn't available, and he's also there to act scared when a monster shows up. They flesh out his relationship with Riku throughout the show, but I don't think of him as anything more than a kinda neat supporting character. Since they had to give Riku a friend, it's cool that they made them an alien.
Ultraman, 向こうに飛んでったけど。
嘘。あなたがあれになるの見たし。
Keeping Riku in check is Laiha, a semi-friend, semi-love interest swordswoman with a tragic backstory.
お箸で人を刺すの良くないよ。
She's super serious and points her plastic sword at Riku when he's doing something stupid. It can be fun. She's got beef with one of the show's antagonists, a Belial lackey named Fukuide K. He's responsible for the death of her parents, so of course she's mad at him. It should be saying something that it's only been 3 or so years since I first watched this show, and I completely forgot this character existed. And he's fairly prominent too, more so than the actual villain Belial. He works as a science fiction author. In one episode, he writes about the events of the Revenge of Belial movie from the perspective of Zero being the bad guy. You know, that's kind of fun. But it's literally the only interesting thing they do with this character. For the rest of the show, he'd be twirling a mustache if he had one. The most he contributes in terms of being an entertaining character is giving Laiha someone to beat up in the finale. A more enjoyable side character who is stranded on the Earth for the time being, one of G.E.E.D's allies is Ultraman Zero. Considering his history with Belial, it made sense to bring him back for the show where he's the main villain. In effect, he becomes another blue secondary Ultra, like Agul and Hikari. In order to stay on Earth for this extended vacation, he's forced to merge with a dorky salaryman named Leto. Direct visual homage to Return of Ultraman, by the way. They've got a less terrifying Jekyll and Hyde thing going here. Zero can randomly take over Leto's body, and Mamoru Miyano's voice starts coming out of his mouth. It'd be freaky if it wasn't played for laughs. I like this dynamic a lot. Zero, your dad isn't a flamboyant dictator. Anyways, I think Zero works way better as a secondary character like this. The Zero movies showcased what kind of person he was, and he worked as a protagonist there, but by now I think most of the avenues of his personality have been explored, and it made sense to let him be a static but cool character in the background. In theory, at least. He takes the spotlight a couple times, but they know to not dwell on it. Mostly static character development aside, there's still a fun dynamic of pairing him with a dweeby office worker and the two of them learning from each other. Leto becoming more confident and Zero getting a taste of fatherhood. If you missed the Ultra Host dynamic because of G.E.E.D and Riku being one and the same person, you still get that approach with Zero. Of all the characters Zero's merged with, Leto is the best.
Cosmos ka. Rashii na. Cosmosって何です? 後で説明する.
Other characters include Riku's stepsister Moa, a ditzy girl failure working for the show's equivalent of an attack team, an underground organization run by aliens that tracks down, deports, or grants citizenship to other aliens. She's got an attraction to Riku. Again, her adopted brother. That's a whole can of worms the show and I don't feel like opening. Moa works alongside Alien Shadow from Ultra 7. He walks around in a human form with a permanently expressionless face, so that's fun.
Hi.
Individual characters might not be the most fleshed out, but the way G.E.E.D's cast interacts with each other gives the show more of a heart. It's appropriate for another show more or less about the power of friendship to have decent character interactions.
君は君だ
Saying a new Ultraman season is about the power of friendship is like saying the sky looks blue. But more so than any other 2010s show, I think G.E.E.D succeeds the most in being about the power of friendship because the characters are just so likable. The premise of G.E.E.D being the son of Belial and needing to build his reputation from nothing and making friends along the way, I think all that works well. But it's everything else that I think needed a second pass, if not consolidating to make it feel less messy. G.E.E.D is attempting to tackle a handful of things: the stigma against the little stars, the indiscriminate hunting of undocumented immigrants, people being afraid of G.E.E.D. Most of it fits into a broad theme of discrimination. As cool of an idea as it is for Ultraman to try to tackle this, with the exception of how Riku's story was handled, I find G.E.E.D's approach to these subjects to be the most undercooked aspect of the show, and it's thanks to a number of things, mainly the pacing. There essentially being a minute of white noise in every episode doesn't help, but the problem runs deeper than the transformations running too long. Like with Orb, I can tell there were some cut corners in the storytelling, so things don't always have time to sit. An example would be a newscaster talking about people's hands burning and then immediately Laiha noticing that her hands melted the ice in her glass. The episode where we learned Laiha's backstory is the same one where we have to deal with Leito's daughter being a little star, neither giving each other time to breathe, in my opinion. The little stars stuff in general feels very undercooked. It probably shouldn't have been in the show at all. The worst the underdeveloped writing gets is in episode 7, how Fukuide K summons a monster in a room full of people, right after making an evil speech too, and the whole thing gets brushed under the rug and nobody outside the main characters talks about it. Like, yeah, for context, the conceit of this scene is that he's doing a live roleplay of his Belial fanfiction with audience participation, so there would be reasonable doubt because he could have just been doing a bit and the monster appearing was just a coincidence, but there had to have been at least one guy in the audience who was like, why did that monster appear when he pulled out that little doohickey? That was kinda weird. Like, there's nothing like that. Nobody outside the main cast talks about this again. And it's not just individual plot points that feel sloppy. Sometimes the point of something can feel a little weird. An example of the more jumbled messaging can be seen in the episode where, after an argument, Leito and Riku decide to switch places. The ultimate point here is for them to both realize something about each other's lives. For Leito, it's that training to be Ultraman is actually quite difficult, but the message for Riku to learn, I don't know, at worst he just has to miss lunch, and then Pega seems to do most of the work for him. The actual point here was for him to start thinking about why he's fighting, since Leito says his family is the reason why he fights. We as viewers know Riku has friends, and that's why he fights. So this revelation just comes off as like, yeah, duh. Why is the show pretending he doesn't have a motivation before now? Sometimes you gotta be reminded why you're doing something, but this is ridiculous. Besides, it was Zero who stepped in to save G.E.E.D and get the credit and adoration of the public. Shouldn't Riku have more of a beef with Zero than Leito? We almost got a funny little episode where two wildly different characters switched places, but it just doesn't take up that much of the runtime. This episode represents a microcosm of the problems with G.E.E.D. The ideas are great, but the execution isn't the best it could have been. Which isn't to say it totally fails in everything. The overall message of the show and how it relates to Riku is actually pretty well done. An isolated example, in a two-parter, Riku learns why he was born. He was made purely to be a pawn of Belial and not out of any actual love. Naturally, he has an identity crisis. A mysterious old man is there to play Tekken with him and remind him that, hey, your real family is the people who raised you, not your genetics. This idea is explored to a much lesser extent with other characters. Fukuide K briefly loses his memory, and he doesn't act evil now that he lacks purpose. Sounds familiar, actually. In another episode, Riku's AI companion Rem makes herself a human body. Just go with it, it's Ultraman. And starts to form a personality now that she's not restrained by her programming. The point of all of this is that external sources shape people. Rem becomes more of a person when she experiences the real world, and K isn't naturally a generic villain. He was influenced into being one through experiences. Even Belial didn't used to be a bad guy. In his case, it's from a more tenuous base because the movie he's from is very goofy. He literally had an evil guy climb into him. But he wasn't always evil. Part of me wishes this wasn't addressed because Belial is more fun when he's just an irredeemable monster without sympathy, but it's part of an overall theme of nature versus nurture, and I think that's a cool thing for a show aimed at children to address. What starts as Riku's catchphrase evolves into being the mantra of the show. You're not going to form your own identity or generally get anything done if you don't make an effort, and having friends to help is the special ingredient that makes it all happen. Obviously, in execution, even this idea could have been done better. Oh boy, it's time to talk about the gimmick. G.E.E.D relying on fusions kinda fits the idea of getting help from friends, but he doesn't really know most of these Ultramen personally. One of them's even the dad he hates so much. So that notion rings hollow. It also doesn't fit the whole thing of forming your own identity when he's using 2 existing Ultramen to do that. If all Riku had was supportive friends and Zero to jump in whenever he's in a bind, and there just weren't any fusion forms at all, I think that would have sufficiently fulfilled the point. This is one of those times where I can say that the toyetic gimmick here actively harms the themes of the show, and it would have been more effective on a storytelling level without them. Maybe we wouldn't have the Ultra series anymore because the show would have failed to reach fiscal expectations, but whatever, I'm talking about ways to actually improve it. Swinging this back into the realm of positivity, despite my problems with the show, this is still my favorite of showrunner Koichi Sakamoto's Ultraman entries. Its competition is Ginga and Trigger, so it's not like it was up against strong contenders. But when this show works, I think it really works. I can forgive a lot of the bad pacing because I enjoy the overall package that much. I don't even mind the Sakamoto-isms like the overuse of green screens this time. In some scenes, there's even a bit of that Taguchi influence with the monster and human fights happening in the same shot, which is always cool to see. The soundtrack from returning Ultra series composer Kenji Kawai is okay. Outside of returning themes for Zero and Belial, I don't remember a lot of it, which sucks because I usually love Kawai's work. But I'm highlighting it here because there's one original track that carries this whole OST. G.E.E.D feels like it has the longest henshin sequences in the whole franchise, so it's a blessing that the music playing during them is so good. It's even used for recaps at the start of episodes. While I'm still talking about this, I want to quickly mention the full 90-second transformation scene for Zero when he gets his Beyond form. I almost respect the level of excess, the sheer audacity to have it go on for a full minute and 30 seconds. They had to have been taking the piss at this point. The opening is good too. Sure, it rhymes story with history and next stage with damage, but it pumps you up. Here are a couple highlights. One of the standouts from this season is the return of the Ultra 7 kaiju G.E.E.D, because he won't stop returning. They keep blowing it up and it keeps coming back at exactly 10 AM every day, so Riku and the gang have to figure out how to stop it. I enjoy the heightened pacing that shows everyone frantically working to figure out what G.E.E.Ron's deal is and how to stop it. Like, yeah, there's something to be said about using a monster with such a tragic backstory from an episode that emphasized, hey, we absolutely cannot let this thing near a city because of its radioactive breath. And then making an episode where it's in a city using the radioactive breath. Do you see the problem there? But they made a fun little story about it, so I can forgive it a little. It's not like they were using Jamila again. That's a monster that's so specific they'd have a hard time bringing it back, and it would be better if they didn't. This is absolutely a subjective thing, so G.E.E.D could be that monster to some fans. I just liked seeing him again, and I thought the episode was neat. I'm briefly going to go over the finale too. Skip to this timestamp if you don't want any major spoilers for the ending. 息子の力を吸収できていれば俺のところへより完璧だったがどうやら反抗期のようだ貴様が父を破るのは2万年早いぜ One thing I respect G.E.E.D for in the long term is that they definitively killed Belial here. Sure, Subaraya just can't help themselves. The tragedy of Belial is that he was too fun of a character to let him stay dead forever. He gets brought back as a clone, and his younger self gets swept up in the Ultra Fight storyline. But this version of Belial, the one from the Mega Monster Battle movie until now, is actually dead. I respect G.E.E.D's ending for giving Riku the chance to get rid of his dad. He even gets to reconcile with him briefly. That and the show ending on a mid-jump freeze frame, that's an instant good rating from me. I'm gonna be sloppy for this next bit because I don't feel like watching a fairly unremarkable end-season movie. All you need to know is that Guy and Juggler are in it, and the latter is very handsy. Remember this. This will be important a couple shows from now. Why does it sound like that? That's f***ing disgusting. I may have been railing against G.E.E.D a lot throughout the video, but I do it out of good faith. Because there are parts of the show that are alright, if not more than alright. In fact, I can't bring myself to say the whole package is a mixed bag. I genuinely like it, despite how flawed it can be. The whole theme of being in charge of your fate and defining yourself through effort. It's nothing new, but tying it to familial bonds here makes it pretty moving. Riku's story has the potential to resonate. The show may fumble the execution at points, but the fact that it had a message like this at all is worth respect. The fights are enjoyable, even in green screen land. The romance between Belial and Zero is as steamy as ever. And when one of the million ideas it throws at the wall sticks, it can be genuinely great. It's a goofy, entertaining, and good-natured show that I can't help but like. It's one of the good 2010 seasons. Believe me, if you didn't like G.E.E.D, you'll start appreciating it after watching the next 2 seasons. That's all I've got. G.E.E.D is a very flawed show, but I like it. Wow, hi gamers. Sorry for the long wait between this one and the Mega Monster Battle video. I felt like I needed to take a break, but I'm back now, hopefully. Like I said during one of the live streams, I'm going to be slowing down a lot this year, but I hope I can still make stuff. Again, a special shout out to all the patrons who are helping keep this channel going. Your name can be up here too if you want to help. If not, then you can just comment or like or share the videos, you know, algorithm bullshit. But yeah, here is a special shout out to the top patrons who get videos like this one extra early. Serix, NerdyGamer556, Neon Yaminair, Jake King, Mech, Celis Ortesia, Blindman, Greninja Zack, Old Metal Possum, Solid Lib, Dinosaurana, Kadorian, Scooter Jit, Mago Muddy, Lobotomy Blues, Cool Bell Zero, Eric Guzda, Janos Firewalker, Easterman, Manila Fan, Sampai, Big Dumb Media, Navik15, Jacob Hinch, Dude Bro, Alistair Gilmore, Seamus Kelly, Fujoshi Urinal, Mulan Nguyen, Irrelevant 402, Hey I'm Mooney, Krazak53, Queer Kaiju, Chronicler Waba, Ryan Santa Cruz, Avak Robot. The antagonist, Godzilla Rich, It's Godz, an actual Dimetrodon, CMG, Red Comet Harry, and Marpzilla. Once again, thank you all very much.